China's presence in South America has grown significantly over the past 2 decades, driven primarily by economic interest with trade, investment, infrastructure projects at the forefront. Since 2020, trade between China and Latin America has surged from 12 billion to over 315 billion by 2020, with projections suggesting it could reach 700 billion by 2035. In South America specifically, China has surpassed the United States as the region's largest trading partner, with countries like Brazil, Chile, Peru, and Uruguay exporting commodities such as soybeans, copper, iron ore, and oil to meet China's industrial and consumer demands. A key element of China's strategy is its Belt and Road Initiative, which has seen 7 South American nations, Venezuela, Ecuador, Peru, Bolivia, Chile, Argentina, and Uruguay, join the program. A prominent example is a $3.5 billion Canque megaport in Peru, inaugurated in November 2024 by Chinese President Xi Jinping. By the way, Biden was there at the same time. Operated by China's state-owned Costco Shipping, COSCO. This deepwater port aims to streamline trade between South America and Asia, reducing shipping times by about 10 days and serving as a hub for neighboring countries like Brazil, Chile, and Colombia. Beyond trade, China's invested heavily in infrastructure, energy, and tech, with state firms holding stakes in projects like the dams in Peru and energy grids in Chile. China's approach emphasizes South-South cooperation, focused on mutual economic benefits without the political conditions often attached to Western aid. This has resonated with South American governments, leading to strategic partnerships with nations like Argentina, Brazil, and Chile. High-level diplomatic engagement has bolstered these ties. Xi Jinping has visited the region multiple times since 2013, and in 2023, a record 8 Latin American presidents traveled to China. Military-wise, China has also expanded its footprint there, selling over $600 million in arms to Venezuela between 2009 and 2019, and providing equipment to countries like Argentina and Bolivia. I mean, this goes on and on. It's growing influence, concern, and there's all this stuff about them and their involvement there. So just go to Grok. It's really problematic.
Yeah, that's what I'm talking about. When I started looking into the BRI a while back, when I started first hearing about it, it's just they have wormed their way into virtually every part of the world, and under Biden's lack of leadership, it just allowed them to accelerate on a much rapider pace, and that's why these tariffs are so important, to try to get a handle on that. And what you're saying yourself in that article, I mean, that's exactly the same stuff that I've been seeing, and other people are too. And it's just, we've really got a lot of catch-up work to do on the globally to head this off before it becomes totally unstoppable and ingrained in these societies to the point that we'll never get it out of them.
It's just insane to me that we gave up the Panama Canal. I mean, what world power would say, yeah, let's just go ahead and give up the Panama Canal? What the hell?
I think to the extent, I'm actually very encouraged because, frankly, just adjusting our attitude fixed half these fucking problems. And the president clearly understands this threat, and so does the national security enterprise. It's not by accident that we had contractors in Haiti, that Blackwater was in the dirt in Ecuador, right? We're going to see a lot more of this. Secretary of State,
can you actually explain that for people? I remember you explaining this in Stall Space, and I think a lot of people hate Blackwater. Understandably, they don't understand that what you were explaining about how it's. You explained it better than me, but can you explain the Blackwater thing? I think that would be good for people. Like so why Trump wants to involve it.
Yeah, well, the short story is Ecuador was a really peaceful country. It was when when Bukele knocked the piss out of MS-13 and took back El Salvador, and a few other countries started smacking the cartels around. The cartels push all their chips into Ecuador. Ecuadorian law enforcement was not at all prepared for this, right? These are guys that, like, on their toughest night are breaking up bar fights. Suddenly they're faced with dudes, in pickup trucks with machine guns, and I'm not exaggerating it, having seen it. You get outside of Cuenca, there's complete conventional fighting, like full-on fighting between the cartel and the military. The short story is the BOA was like, I need help. But because his predecessor left-wing nut job who's no longer even allowed in the country and is wanted by several other countries, hiding in Belgium. He's the one who mentored the guy, the woman running against Naboa right now, by the way, another Chinese advocate. They were totally overwhelmed, and Naboa, without a call, he's like, I just need help from anyone. But his predecessor had changed the Ecuadorian constitution to not allow foreign military support. We used to have an air base in Ecuador called Manta Air Base, right? Part of the reason it was so peaceful and secure, that's the reason. So the way he tried to plug the gap is there's nothing illegal about PM's private military contractors in Ecuador, coupled with their attorney general. Basically, once if he wins the election, Blackwater can come in, and they're not coming in this cartoonish version of like people have a insane version of what this is, but it's actually about training. It's about getting their law enforcement spun up, giving them intelligence capabilities to fight narco-terrorism, and doing a lot of drug interdiction work. They'll be training up a force that's capable of doing this, but they do so under the Attorney General of the country's blessing. Basically, total immunity for any of the counter narcotics forces, which is what we learned from Plan Colombia was the right strategy. And we're, because of the pressure, especially when it comes to special operations, our guys are completely task saturated. Our tier 1 units, SEALs, Army units that shall not be named, right? Like they have come to Congress recently, now that they have a friendly administration, saying we can't handle anymore. So the DOD, at least for now, has to be very careful with very precious resources, right? These guys don't grow on trees. So they're going to augment that with private contractors in the short term, especially in Central and South America, and frankly, they'll be more effective down there anyway. But the reason I'm optimistic is like we're paying attention to it, and any country given the option between doing business with the United States of America or China will choose us. We just haven't been showing up to the party, right? It was not a priority for our State Department. Was making no inroads for us. They were discouraging American companies from going down there. The Chinese had no competition. I'm wildly optimistic because we have a lot of reasons to be. Without any help, Javier Milei emerged. Without any U.S. help, Bukele emerged, right? This 35-year-old Daniel Noboa, right, is literally like surrounded by a huge security. Their attorney general has the largest security detail I've ever seen, including presidential ones. Like, this government is serious about actually fighting it. They're not corrupt. They're not completely captured, and we have a very narrow window to help out a few friends that'll be friends for a lifetime. You're talking about countries who actually have clean water, clean soil, not polluted environments. We have young, highly literate, highly motivated, and capitalistic populations to draw from, all of which benefits the United States of America. Europe is collapsing. These are our friends of the future. These are our allies of the future. If you just look at it geographically, I know I would sleep a lot better if we occupied Alaska, Greenland, Central and South America, and the United States of America. I would sleep pretty fucking secure, because that makes defending that really easy, and it also eliminates our need to go 7,000 miles across the pond and pay an existential enemy for critical supplies. We can do that in our own backyard for half the price, and we're actually helping people who actually want to help us, right? Like, let's stop paying our enemies for stuff and help our friends who want to actually be our friends, right? Let's do that, because that's good for all of us. That is good for all of us. We need the things that they have to offer in there, and it's arriving at the perfect time. I'm wildly optimistic. It's going to be bumpy. Venezuela is going to be bloody. But with the exception of Nicaragua, all of these countries are still very easily brought right back. Because the beauty is once the U.S. shows up, they can tell the Chinese to pound sand, and there's nothing the Chinese are going to do about it. Right? The Marines, in fact, just landed. Actually, it was 2 days ago. They just landed a Marine squadron there's Marine combat pilots who are in Panama, and they're permanently relocated there. And we're going to see this in quite a few other places because the Chinese apparently want to buck around with the Panama Canal. And I don't think they understand that Trump is serious about protecting that investment. And that's why SecDef's on his way there. And we're going to see more of this. I'm wildly optimistic about it, and I think we have a lot of reasons to be optimistic about it. So I'm not here to throw black pill. On the contrary, I'm just pointing out that like some of the early behaviors of the Trump administration are very explainable when you understand the Chinese, Russian, and Islamic presence down there, and also that he's desperate to decouple from China, which isn't, I think we all agree, is in our best interest. At a minimum, we shouldn't be supplying an enemy of the United States with our hard-earned money, especially when there are alternatives. So make of that what you will. I didn't mean to come in here and rant, and I will step.
No, that's okay. It's actually very helpful. I was going to ask you, what was the previous administration doing in that region? Nothing? Or
Nothing.
like
In
working
fact,
against
Stealth may remember, I went through the entire diplomatic corps of South America during the Biden administration. I think there was only 5 ambassadors that spoke Spanish between Central America and South America. Like, we've done nothing.
That's crazy.
I'm sure Kamala Harris spoke perfect Spanish and was probably in contact with him daily, though, you know?
I think didn't we prop up like Lula over there and like.
By the way, speaking of that area,
we
have Bolsonaro over. Yeah, it looks like it looks
what are
like
we gonna do? Are we gonna help them? Do you think?
Bolsonaro back. We
I
need to
feel
get
like we should
Bolsonaro back. We got to at least protect his life.
Yeah, like we gotta give him asylum or we gotta.
I don't know if you guys know what's going on, like in Brazil, but it's actually very serious because the previous regime pretty much helped Lula throw Bolsonaro overboard, in my opinion. Listen, don't take this as fact, but from like the dots that you can connect, that's pretty much what we did with USAID and our own money. We pretty much propped up the communist CCP infiltrated party of Lula, but I think that Lula can't even control the country anymore because now I think it's Darth Vader who's really running the show, the judge.
We actually installed a military dictatorship over there a number of years ago.
He's Darth Vader. I thought he was Lord Voldemort.
Whatever.
Maybe it's all of them.
Can I ask a couple questions of Sin? If you don't mind?
Sure.
Thank you.
I'm not in charge, but sounded good.
Thank you, Barbie, Shane, everybody in the room. I love Sin's voice. He's very soothing, but he's also highly and like totally in tune with what's going on, right? I just love his his knowledge. So, like what everybody chimed in, I'm very concerned about Brazil. The CCP has cut
Dr.
major
Martell.
deals with Lula in terms of assets. We're talking, minerals, lumber, access to their natural resources. Obviously, the whole election, Bolsonaro, we all know the story. We don't have to reiterate that, right? The censorship. How do you see the judicial, which the problems with the judicial, overcome it, how we overcome that? Well, Brazil overcomes that. But then again, the same thing in Brazil is happening here and in Europe. So that's the overall question I have with the judicial. And then I'm going to ask you, totally in the European front, okay? I am very concerned about Europe and the European Union's power over, the entire control over sovereignty of countries, meaning they kind of handed over their power to the EU. And how do you see potentially, or do you not see individual countries regaining control of their sovereignty and disabolishing the EU in general? I mean, there comes a time where I have to believe that Europe, France, Germany, there's got to be some sanity in the room, right? And they realize that EU is the dictatorship that it is. I'm just, what are your thoughts on that concept? Is there any hope for that? And the last question I have is, I'm very concerned about the rising group of Republicans that are now talking about
Hey,
passing
do you mind?
legislation.
Let's stick with the one question so we don't get lost. I don't want people to miss your
I'm
point.
sorry.
No, you're good.
I bored everybody. I bored everybody. Sorry.
No, you're not boring us. I'm just watching people join the room. I want to make sure that we don't miss the first question. So, Sen, did you get the first question, or would you like to restate it?
Yeah, I got the first two, and I can knock them out pretty easy. Yes, the Chinese can pick off some elites. They can buy out some allegiances. But where the Chinese are painfully bad at, and this was true in Africa as well, is they don't get the people at all. In particular, they really don't get Latin people, right? So you can buy, your token diplomat, you can buy a few countries, but when Latinos take to the street in numbers, that doesn't mean shit, right? Like when they get to the street, like they don't have the sophistication, their soft power game to run the street. The Russians do. They proved it in Colombia with Petro. The Russians do.
सपनों से कह दो कि रात को ना आया करें, अब हम दोपहर को सोते हैं। सपनों से कह
advantageous, but the short answer is their weakness is our greatest benefit, and that's why Rubio is so important in this region. He is literally the man who can speak the language and understands how to talk to Latins about a communism latched on to largely misguided principles because no one else is there.
How much do I need to retire? This is a question everyone has. अल्लाह ही को क़यामत का इल्म है और वही मैं बरसाता है और वही हामिला के पेट की चीजों को जानता है और कोई शख्स नहीं जानता कि वो
speak fluent Spanish and understand what the hell's going on in the ground there. We do, and we're also smart enough to listen to the people. We have a much better grasp on Latin American culture than they ever hoped to be. So I'm wildly optimistic regarding your concerns about the judiciary. Look, hopefully we can reform them, but it depends on the level of corruption. Bukele, when he came into El Salvador, there was no redeeming it. It was so thoroughly corrupt he had to abolish it, right? Now that comes with inherent dangers, and that's something we have to watch. Bukele's been great. I'm rooting for him, but let's make no mistake, he has full dictatorial control of El Salvador right now. That's good. We have to be cautious with that, but we just have every advantage here that the Chinese don't, and I think it's in our understanding of the culture.
Judiciary.
So again, I think the people will deal with that. I think we're already starting to see it. I think the people have a way of working these things out on their own. I really do. But let me just get off this real quick because I know you guys want to move on to another thing. Europe is a fucking shit show, but not all of Europe is a complete dumpster fire. France, especially after their behavior in the last 48 hours, I not only should they be thrown out of NATO, I think we may as well move them into an existential enemy camp. Their behavior is indistinguishable to me from President Xi. They're acting at minimum on behalf of protecting the IRGC. Any country that is working in favor of supporting a 5th century death cult to get a thermonuclear there are nations with real stones there. There are nations that know what time it is, and we want to be careful about not throwing the baby out with the bathwater, because the polls, they're ready to get down tomorrow, and they are all the way Team America. They know what time it is. They're encouraging all their neighbors, like, rearm. Trump was right. They listened to him the first time. Like, it's going to be a mixed bag, and I think that we will find there's going to be some reshuffling. I don't know where that all lands yet, but if a major European power, primarily England, France, or Germany, maybe Italy, if we don't see a Churchill emerge very quickly, Europe is going to have serious problems. Our allies are going to be okay in Europe, but other than that, I predict very serious problems because they're not acting like serious nations.
The one thing,
That's it.
Sin, about Norway. Norway has been taken over in a pretty bad way, and they're very wealthy. And we can't stand to lose Norway. We got to do something about that. That's another. Their fertility rates are really down, and they've got basically 500,000 refugees running the country. And there's 5 million Norwegians not getting married. They're atheists. They're not having kids. The churches have literally been taken over and made into mosques. They're actual churches, like a regular church, but they run it as mosques. It's insane what's going on. We had a space and we had a bunch of Norwegians come in and tell us what's going on because they wanted to recruit 500,000 Norwegians to go to Ukraine, and they're like, we're not going. They were just like, we're not going. We don't want to do this. But they've gotten so wealthy since the whole Nord Stream thing, and since the regular people are not benefiting from that income. It's going to a few elites. That's the problem.
Yep, Northern Europeans, the reason that they're in this game is they're profiting off of it. Their people are all suffering, but they don't care about their people, which is why there's a huge disconnect there. Look, I'm sorry, but like, in an era with thermonuclear weapons, artificial intelligence, and potential kinetics all over the world, we have to choose where we apply our resources appropriately. And I'm sorry, but some of these nations are going to have to either save themselves or be written off, because Norway is only significant until we have Greenland, right? When Greenland's in the pocket, I'm sorry, there's not a lot of incentive there. I love the Danes, served with the Danes a lot. They're a very professional military, have a lot of respect for them. But today they signed a strategic alliance with France to include Greenland. So they literally, imagine a group of people, imagine the Danes, because they're brilliant people. These are smart people, right? They got together and weighed the pros and cons and weighed the United States of America, a country who has saved Europe not once but twice, whose accomplishments includes winning everyone we have ever fucking fought. Right, the only person that ever beat the U.S. military was the American politicians. Those are the only adversaries the American military apparently cannot overcome. They literally chose a nation that's famous for surrendering. They chose the pastry-eating, white flag surrendering French, right, who have shown nothing but systemic surrender wherever they've gone. Right, that's who they threw their lot in with. I'm sorry, Danes. I love you. I want you in a fight. You got badass, savage blood, big, angry men. I love you. You got high-end tech, but you just signed an agreement with the biggest pussy in Europe, right? Like, you just emboldened your enemy when you had an opportunity to retain territorial integrity of Greenland. You could still kept it as yours and just let the U.S. military use what it do, which is actually under the water that you don't need to see or even fucking hear about. We're concerned about nuclear submarines under Greenland, right? Like, we just need to make sure no one sneaks across the poles and makes New York City glow in the dark. It's not rocket science. And by the way, it's in the Danes' best interest too. They can't afford to support this kind of program. We can. All right, let me shut up because I've been ranting too long. I came into the space and I've been ranting for 30 minutes.
People need to understand why losing Denmark is such a big deal. Like, we should have put as much pressure as possible. The Turks flooded them, if people don't know, with refugees. There is a red-green alliance going on there. I got to do a space with some of these Danish guys. These are all like guys served in the military. They came into a space in the middle of the night because I was running a space on the AFD elections, the German elections, and they just unloaded. They're like, yeah, we're atheists. We don't get married. We haven't had kids. There's the right wing of us that are trying to bring things back, but we've lost it because the elites that are running the country made so much money because of the Nord Stream pipeline situation that we're like nothing. Everybody else lives for free there, and they're suffering as the regular people. And they're like, there's 5 million of us left, but I think he had a prediction like within 20 years or something, there'd be no more Danish left. It's like it's completely wiping out a whole population of people, and they know they did it to themselves. But like, you have a chance to like not align yourself with the French right now, and they went ahead and did it. Not good.
Let's just, I'm gonna say this, I'm gonna step down. I'll get out of you guys' way, but we're Americans, like, I think that one of our strengths is sometimes throwing our junk around, right? Because that's what the world relies on us to. But let's give some latitude for some grace, because we were a few million votes short of Europe. I mean, the reality is 4 more years of Biden, with another 20 million people in our country, percentage-wise, we would have been in a very similar position. We were an election away, a few states away from being in a very similar position. So I'm going to leave room for a Churchill to emerge somewhere in there and win. That the people will have enough. And with that, I can't wait to welcome them back, because God knows I've killed enough brain cells with Aussies, Brits, and Danes all over Europe. I mean, I love them, but their government's got to pull their heads out of their asses. But let's make, except for France. I can't comfort France. I will never trust the French again. I wouldn't. I'm trying to find French products to boycott. I don't even know I'd buy anything from France. Can we tariff the fuck out of just being French? Can we make that impossible?
Yes.
I'm done. I'm out here.
I have an idea on that. We should make it a huge tax fine penalty, whatever you want to call it, just to go there. That's my idea.
No, for them to come here even.
One thing I don't entirely understand is, I think, I totally agree about having more Churchill type leaders. I think would be fantastic. But I think that we've seen Europe, just as the U.S. has often done, Europe has created bogeymen that have been used by the respective, you could say, deep states, or the bureaucracies, the establishments, the bourgeoisie, however you want to term it, right? But I mean, Russia has used.
These people are fucking crazy.
I think your mic is on Go Heels. Accidentally. So, but like Putin is kind of like the favorite bogeyman of every socialist leader in the West, who wants to find somebody to kind of pin their, all their anger and everything on. And so I think Putin's not a good guy. I think Russia is also not necessarily, they don't have to be a natural enemy of the United States, but they are actually a natural enemy of China, right? So like I think the zeal that we see with some of the European leaders to target Russia just grows. I mean, it just grows this entire thing that helps China in Latin America and in Central America and in the Pacific region. And if we had a friendlier relationship with Russia, which I think is something that Trump does seem to want, just kind of a détente for a real politic, that would be highly beneficial to the United States. We don't have to be best friends with them.
Did you hear Trump today on Russia? He is fucking pissed at Putin. He is so pissed. He's like, he's still bombing.
Yeah, I understand that.
He is he's getting a taste of Russia right now.
Yeah, but that doesn't, of course, and that's consistent with Trump's foreign policy approach of, kind of chaos as part of the deal, right? I mean, I think what Trump actually wants, fairly consistently over many years, he has said that we should be, relatively speaking, we should be at peace with Russia. And he even says China, although I think that Trump's actions clearly show that he sees China as the real threat, which undeniably is true. And, we have pushed Russia towards China with all of our foreign policy moves under the Biden administration. And of course, there's a lot of hawkish people who really got mad that they weren't involved in the Trump administration.
With an aggressive
who
amount
would
of
love
their
to
house
see
made mac and
Russia
cheese,
continue to go
a
towards China
healthy
because
amount
then
of
it's a
their crispy
bigger enemy
fries,
to target, which just
a
means
heavy
it would
drizzle of their
be,
signature
easier
fluffy
to go
sauce
and
over
get involved more
then 20 hot oil
adventures.
brush
And so I
and
think
generously
that,
spiced
it's a
chicken
smart
tenders,
policy to
get
have
chopped up by their
with
master
Russia,
chicken chopper,
and to think about China as being as isolated as possible. I thought it was interesting
then
that
every
Trump
last
didn't
piece
announce
of those
tariffs on
hot chicken
Russia. Of course, the
tenders get
sanctions are kind of
jam-packed on
like
top of those
tariffs, right?
fries and
But
mac and
sanctions don't cover
cheese.
everything, and it's interesting that they kind of
And one
passed
last
that
drizzle
along.
of fluffy
That was targeted by
sauce.
some
The family
left,
platter
but
from Fluffy's in New Jersey, coming
Jess,
soon
he
to
said
New
today, we don't really
कुरान
do
पाक
any
की एक
business with
छोटी
them.
सी
There's
आयत
nothing more that
जिसे
they
आप
need to
जिंदगी में सिर्फ
sanction
एक बार
them
पढ़ते हो तो
there's
अल्लाह
already other
ताला
things
उसके
that
लिए
they put on
जहन्नुम
them
को
that are
हराम
not
कर देता है
tariffs.
और जन्नत को वाजिब कर देता है और अल्लाह ताला उसकी मगफिरत कर देता है
Because he
वो
told us to
छोटी
stop
आयत
fucking
है
launching rockets and
रब्बना
stop making
आतिना
them a
फी
problem
दुनिया
in
हसना
Europe, and they didn't listen to him. So he said,
right,
to
but I
advanced
think,
trading.
yeah,
Join
well,
the
I'm
future.
sure.
Putting tariffs on
Again, I
for
think
Russia.
Yeah, there would be. No, it's okay. It would be purely
लड़कियां जब कोई
symbolic,
ख्वाब देखती
right? But
हैं उसे बजट के अनुसार
I
बना
think
कर
what
देखती
Trump
हैं
is doing is he's setting up
कभी जो
for a
आपके आसपास
negotiation
कोई
in
लड़की
a
ख्वाबों को
post-war
पूरा करती
phase.
दिखे ना
So
समझ
the United
जाना
States has a lot of interest in
एक
Ukraine.
लंबा रास्ता तय
I
किया
am
उसने
personally skeptical. I mean,
परिवार
I
की
think
उम्मीदें
we
आजकल के
talk about
बच्चों को
terrorists,
सब्जी
and
पसंद
there's
ना
a sudden linkage here, but like the thing with Russia is that I always get really concerned about is I notice
The chances of you seeing this YouTube show
Russia
is
today,
super
and they want
There's
us to
over
really
100
be
million.
hardwired against Russia, push Russia towards China, are the same people who supported us going into Iraq and the surge, and we just these were all the right policies, and I noticed a lot of that kind of interventionist attitude, if you will. There's a lot of that. Even the Republican Party, not a lot of it as much as it used to be. Most of the people have exiled from the Republican Party, like Bill Kristol, it was a total joke. But I think it's notable. Like I agree with him.
Really?
Oh my gosh, it's good.
Was he really respected on
He
it?
has, no, I don't think so. But he was respected in some circles for a while.
दोस्तों फजर की
No, I
नमाज अदा
understand
कर
about Marco Rubio is a great leader, I think. And he's very tough. Interestingly, Rubio was kind of a warhawk, and then when he came around to the American policy,
Like, I love him. I really love him.
yeah, so, like, I-
of that appointment, but I
absolutely.
love him. He's doing an amazing job.
Yeah, I just, I'm very, very cautious. Like I'm all for. I think it's actually probably the right thing to do for us, like to get involved in Ecuador. But I would want us to do it quietly. I don't think we need to like make a big deal of it. It's like that's kind of the sort of thing that we should be very quiet about, because we're really, if we do that, we're fighting a proxy war against China, effectively. And the electoral process, which we've done for decades, just nobody really knows about it, and very few people are aware of it. Even the people that often say they know everything about it, a lot of times they don't know really what's happened. And there's a lot of different accounts until afterward we kind of see. But I just would love to see us stay away from foreign conflict in general, with Russia particularly. And then I think that with China, eventually, like in the next 5 years, if we keep doing this, China is going to collapse. It's probably going to happen within the next couple of years. I mean, folks are breathing on China. We'll tell you, people with business people there, VCs there, and folks that are in that market. But I tell you that China's regime is really teetering on the brink. China's been in an economic slump, and they really overbuilt, and they've got all these vacant cities and all this infrastructure that's basically useless, and they're facing a real threat. And so, with the desire for some people to push Russia towards China,
Chair
especially
recognizes
Western
Alderman
Europe,
Gardner.
there's this notion.
Thank you, Mr. President.
China kind of has this lifeline, and if the U.S. can figure
I
out
stand
how
against
to
this.
prevent that from happening, China really has almost no friends. I mean, India is very skeptical of China. There's a lot of folks that think that India and China are like best buddies. That is clearly not true. And so China is kind of becoming more and more isolated. And then Hong Kong was their biggest single economic engine. And Hong Kong is the one per capita any other asset within China's control, whether it's a company or a territory, more than Macau, more than everything else. And yet Hong Kong now has been strangled, right? And there's really no new inflows of foreign capital into Hong Kong. Hong Kong is shrinking. So I think that isolating China is good policy, but we have to do it the right way. And I just don't want us to be, gearing up for another war all the time. I want us to be always ready for war, but never actually try to go out and create a war, if that makes sense. I want us to always be armed and ready. Fortress America, I've heard said, kind of as a making fun of Trump. I'm for Fortress America. I mean, we shouldn't be going in and trying to, run other countries. We got plenty of stuff to run right here. And that'll include the beautiful territory of Greenland. Icy, beautiful Greenland, your new favorite vacation destination. Get a selfie with a polar bear. It's going to be great. So very excited about Greenland.
Are you? This is serious? You think you really think we're going to take Greenland?
I would actually right now, if you had to put odds on it, I would put a 55-60% chance on it. I think it's more likely than not, because I don't think there's any way.
I didn't say wow. I said wow. Yeah, I mean, I guess I just really. I was thinking, I don't know, it's so hard to tell what it's about.
Think about how Russia, talking about Russia, I realize that there are a lot of people out there, that even in MAGA, that there's a handful of people in MAGA that think Russia's the most evilest person, okay, whatever. Just looking from a purely geopolitical, realpolitik, kind of Russia goes in and takes Crimea, okay? There was no big conflict. Why? Because the people in Crimea that would have resisted were like, well, I guess we can't stop this. And then the others were basically, okay, we'll leave Russia, and there were plenty of people who were pro-Russia. And, Crimea historically was part of the Russian Empire, so there you go. And there was no big thing to it. And all the people was, how dare it happen? Nothing happened. Nothing happened. And in general, that is what occurs when you have an annexation. So if we annex Greenland, there's going to be all these condemnations and but you know what? You're going to see governments fall really quickly into line. Icelandic government would be one of the first because they're right there, and they'd be like, and they do most of the flights to Greenland that don't come from Denmark come from Iceland, and so they would say, well, we're going to accept this, and our allies are United States, and you'll see them fall in line. There's no reason besides we already have a presence in Greenland. We have 4 bases in Greenland in the past. People forget that we have space. Base down. We have more stuff before. So I mean, there's no reason that they would stop it. I don't know that means we're going to take it back from Greenland. I think we're going to put Greenland in a position where they have to accept. It sounds like, from what I understand, I don't think I've seen the sources of that people in the administration. I think what's going to happen is the Trump administration is going to go to Greenland and say, look, the law, by the way, just so if anybody does not know this, I'm sure most of y'all do know this, Greenland and Denmark have a law, just like the devolution laws that occurred in the UK, but actually more stringent than that. So it is on the books in Denmark that if Greenland seeks a independence referendum, they have the option to break apart from Denmark. That is Greenlandic law, that is Danish law. So I think what Trump's going to do is he's going to go to Greenland and he's going to say, look, let's set up a deal where you're an aligned state and then you become a territory of the U.S. We're going to pay you this amount of money.
Mr. President,
and every
Donald
person
Trump
in Greenland is going to get this amount of money. That's what it sounds like is going to happen. That's been publicly stated that is something that's going to happen. A lot of press have reported on that, even mainstream press. And if you think about it, we can afford to do it. I mean, there's only 50,000 people in Greenland, not even, right? 250,000 people, geez, that's a lot of people. 50,000 times, $100 is $5 million. Well, what if you gave every person in Greenland 1,000? That'd be 50 million. So you see, you very quickly you can get to a number that's pretty crazy to give everybody money, and they don't have the money, and they've never gotten it from Denmark. We can buy love if we have to. Love is a choice. And most folks would love to be in the U.S., really, if they had their druthers. And we will let them keep all their customs. Unlike the Danish, we're not going to go and forcibly, put IUDs in half of the Greenlandic women without even their knowledge, not much less their consent. I mean, that's freaking nuts. That is like a miniature, it's like Nazi type sterilization. I mean, it's horrific. And that's actually what the Danish did to Greenlanders. So that's why the Greenlanders are so afraid of all of this on some level. Yeah, they don't want to be in the U.S. right now. But a lot of it has to do with this fearfulness related to how Denmark has treated them for a long time. We're going to be much nicer about it, but I think we will take them. I think in the end, it's more likely than not that before the end of Trump's first term, we will do it. And you know, I'm not going to say the wokeness is liberators, but why would they oppose, require nothing, and make it a totally independent territory like Guam or something, where they get like tons of cool free stuff, pay no income tax? I mean, who would want to be that? Yeah, that's pretty awesome. And it's a great like vacation destination, Barbie. You know, like, you know, we can hop on a plane, you know, get on JFK, you know, go to JFK, or God bless O'Hare. Horrible O'Hare. I think it's like if you go to hell, you know, I think it's cool. If I go O'Hare in LA,
We can give them U.S. citizenship, free flights to America anywhere they want, including Hawaii, and no taxes.
Yeah.
And just, you know.
Yes.
And, yeah.
And then I'm gonna move there and live there instead of here. I mean.
Exactly.
Yeah, we won't even make them. We won't even make them fly Frontier. We're gonna give them a free pass that says you don't have to fly Frontier or Spirit ever. Where a couple of weeks ago I had to fly.
What the hell is Frontier?
To a little town in the Midwest, and I had to go behind. I was flying American, which I don't do a lot. I have a lot of old American points, and so to Dallas to somewhere else, and like I had to get behind. Like there was this huge grouping of
Find
people,
that I do better at.
and like everybody was like really like rude and angry and mean, whatever. I'm like, what in the heck? And it's like, oh, this is like here's a plane full of people going Spirit, and here's a plane full of people going Frontier, and they're all angry because their flights are late and they're just like having a miserable time. I'm like, oh my gosh, like that is like sounds like just the worst. So don't go to hell, kids. Do the right thing. You know, you won't be stuck at O'Hare or LAX in the afterlife flying on Spirit or Frontier. So, but I think we're gonna get green.
So I want to run through Jess.
I kind of thought it was silly at first, but.
So Jess, I want to run through a decoupling scenario with you, but first I want to go through these hands.
What's up, man?
So let's get these hands real quick. They've been up for a little while. Primary, then
knock them out.
Vegas. Go ahead, primary.
So I absolutely agree with Jess. I don't think we're gonna have to annex them though. I think that 2.5 billion will give 50,000 to all their 50,000 residents. And I think they will come over voluntarily by a vote. I think if we give them a sovereign fund on everything that's sold out of their minerals, they get 5-10% of that. Who wouldn't take that? I would take 60,000-70,000 or 50,000 up front and 10,000-20,000 a year. As far as what we were talking about before, I don't have as rose-colored glasses as some people.
This is IllinoisRecord.com. Breaking news. Thanks to everyone sharing it. This is IllinoisRecord.com.
I can't remember which one.
Breaking news. Thanks to everyone sharing yesterday's article. Sean Morrison resigned as Cook County GOP chair. Rejected by both liberals and conservatives, Sean Morrison resigns 1 year before his term was set to end. Thanks to your continued support and attention, our reporting has once again made an impact. Sean Morrison, the pedophile defending Cook County GOP chair, has officially resigned. 1 year before his term was set to end, he leaves office in disgrace. Warning, shocking content. Orland Park Police released the text messages Anthony Martin sent to the teenager he molested in Sean Morrison's house. Even after Martin's arrest, Morrison insisted he trusted Martin and continued to employ him and provide him with a cell phone. Illinois Record previously reported on Sean Morrison's letter to Cook County Judge Hines, urging leniency for Anthony Martin, a man convicted of molesting a teenager at Morrison's own home. The judge ultimately granted that leniency, even allowing Martin to travel on Morrison's behalf. Unlike the non-child sex offenders Morrison routinely criticizes on Twitter, Martin quickly reoffended in Colorado.
We're strong enough to do that our own way. We have the most powerful market. Everybody wants our market. That's why the tariffs will work. And Trump was right in 2016, and it's going to come the truth now. I'll land with that.
Thanks, primary. Hey Jane, we see you just hopped up here. Do you have something related to what he was just saying, or do you want me to go through the rest of the hands and come to you?
It was actually about
Morrison's 9 years at the helm were defined by scandal, financial collapse.
Yeah, go for it. Just let's cover the Greenland topic while we're on it, and then we'll go to the rest of the hands.
Okay, yeah, actually, I haven't really been hopping into spaces lately, but this is something I haven't seen anybody really talking too much about, is the Greenland situation and how it could relate to the whole, like, Houthi situation. And I was wondering if anyone, I'm sure, like, everybody had, or a lot of people had the spotlight on Thomas Massey when he was pointing out, like, how, hopping into the Red Sea isn't really benefiting the U.S., but it is, the top corporations it is benefiting is Maersk, which is a Danish company. And so I was just thinking, like, if anybody's, like, consider that maybe Trump's pressure on political isn't really just about U.S. national security, but actually Denmark's national security, because Maersk, or some people might see it on like shipping containers as Maersk. It's like a huge shipping agent from Denmark, and they gain enormously from secure passage through the Red Sea, and it's no secret that Trump is focused on securing Greenland for the U.S. to combat China and Russia's advancements there in the Arctic. But I'm thinking, like, what if his emphasis on national security was actually more about Denmark's security, so he can ensure that Maersk could operate freely and that Denmark's economic interests were protected, and maybe it was a calculated move, positioning us to dominate the region and strengthen ties with Denmark.
Yeah, it's an interesting concept. Jess or Primary, did you want to come back on that?
Well, yeah, I mean, the only comment I have, and I don't see the Denmark connection, but my only comment on that is oil and gas, which is what fuels the world right now, it fuels geopolitics. 5-10 years from now will mean nothing. Minerals mean everything, because everything is going towards that, and that's why Greenland's so important. It's not because Greenland has the minerals and they have the oil, because oil will still be around, but it won't rule the world like it does today.
Okay, I'm sorry to, like, cut in, but you're 1,000,000% wrong.
Go for it. Tell us why.
Okay, and defend that.
That's not why we need Greenland. And if you're still stuck on that perspective, like, you're what's holding us back. Like, you might as well be working for China.
How is that? This is getting interesting. I love this. Go ahead. Can you explain that, Jane?
See, Russia and China, they run the border of the Arctic. The U.S. tried to really take advantage of it by getting a piece of Alaska from Russia, but we're not, moving forward in the Arctic, and the ice is melting. So they've been up in the Arctic for a really long time. They're building bases. They're exploring. They're, understanding what the Arctic is about. They're gaining control of a region of the world that's developing, and the U.S. has absolutely nothing there. We have some ships there, but they're old. They're rotting. We don't have a lot of tools to get there. Our government isn't investing any money into it, and Trump is probably the first president that I've seen in my lifetime that has aggressively pursued matching, or even trying to pursue matching what China and Russia are doing in the Arctic. If we lose the Arctic, we're definitely going to fall behind in power in the world. So it's not about oil, it's not about gas, before they go into those going on about.
we need to have a military presence in that part of the world, or they're just going to keep putting their flags down in every territory where the ice is melting. The Arctic is going to be habitable at some point, and Russia and China right now have staking claims to it.
Hey Shane, can I argue?
Yeah, go for it, and then we'll go to stealth. Go ahead, primary, and then.
Okay, so I don't disagree that the military point of view is just an added benefit of it. Of course, that and it's equal. So I'll say that, and I didn't mention that earlier. But the future is silicon. The future is batteries. The future is robotics. The future is AI. If the only way we beat China is by being ahead of them. If we don't beat China, then China wins. China rules. So the minerals that are there is what supplies our future. And this is only the next 5 years. I'm not talking 10, 20 years out. So it's an equal thing. Yes, militarily phenomenal to be right across the strait from China and Russia. And I think more China than Russia. Well, I mean, Russia will be our friend. But the minerals are absolutely critical.
Primary. So why are you pushing for mining in Greenland, which is like iced, when
We turned out that remarkable scientific breakthrough 13,000 years after the last
provider of silicon and a ton of other minerals, nickel, we got silver. Nevada is the #1 supplier of gold to the U.S. So why are you looking to this iced land, Greenland, land of ice? Yeah, have to be that's worse one by call the silicon.
I agree with that, except the demand, there's no way we can meet the demand for what we need in the future. So we need the
Yeah, but you didn't say that. You literally said 5 to 10 years.
Can I finish? We need Nevada, we need Alaska, we also need Greenland because we can't meet the demand of the things that we need to beat China in the future without that's what we have to do around the world. We cannot meet the demand for what we're going to do in the next 5 years without all this country demand for it.
Let's get a third perspective in here. Stealth, I saw your hand go up when they started talking about this.
Yeah.
Before.
Yeah, so just a couple things when it comes to Greenland. So because the Arctic is melting, routes and global routes of trade will be shifting towards there, and we need to have dominance of that region. Primarily for that, it's a vital checkpoint for naval operations in the North Atlantic, and usually track Soviet submarines during Cold War. But it's still relevant today with Russia's growing Arctic pressure. Okay, so we operate as obviously a space base over there in Northwest Greenland that supports our missile defense and everything. But we need to control that area in order to protect power, and also because of these shipping routes, it's going to change global trade throughout the world. And we need to have that control of that. That's what that is. Everything else about the minerals and all that is like a wonder. It's the main reason we should control that because of shipping routes and over that for us to not be set up on. Having areas for our submarines throughout that region is very important. We've seen success over by Ireland in competitors. So this is like a key point. So that's the main reason. Yeah. And then there's something else that was brought up regarding to the Houthis. So I didn't want to say this like very publicly, but very few people know that the Houthis launched missiles at F-16, and whether we like it or not, the U.S. is really pissed over that. Yes, there's about the shipping routes, and yes, it's about the drawback. Chinese are providing, weapons and supplies there, and that's a major issue. And, we want to help out the Saudis, and this is another important thing for Abraham Accord, and to stabilize the area. But, Yemen, these are a small group of people that are taking over the entire bit of Yemen. So now the Yemen military was on the ground doing quite a bit of ground operations. But this motherfucker launched a rocket at an F-16 plane. And so I posted it earlier on my feed. I just didn't want to publicly talk about it because, you know, everybody would freak out and be like, oh, it's only a rocket and it didn't hit us. No. You don't launch a rocket at a U.S. fighter jet, period, full stop. If you do, you're going to need severe deterrence. And it is very worth it. Think how much those jets cost us compared to, you know, what we've been dropping on them. And we do need target practice for other reasons, and we do need to exert deterrence to other countries. And the main way to kneecap Iran and some other bad actors is to take out their last proxy, which is the Houthis. So that's happening. But they made a very big mistake and they launched a rocket. So I have it on my feed. This military guy, I think he's former Air Force captain or something, he brought, I'll put it in the upper bubble, but that's the real dirty reason. But nobody really wants to talk about it. Because then people would be like, you see, it's not about this, it's not about that, it's not about Israel, it's not about this. That's the dirty truth, is that they launched a rocket at our planes. So you're not allowed to do that. It's a no-no. And by the way, it's not the Houthis. IRGC is on the ground. That's who's running. That's who's doing everything. Their equipment, their targeting, their naval strips. That's who's launching at us. They screwed the pooch on this one. So that's it. That's where we're at. It's not like the Houthis, like these guys that don't have shoes, right? That are launching and doing targeting. Those are IRGC military, you know, individuals that have been there for a while, by the way, also. So that's another reason why they did that. So I'll post it in the upper bubble for everybody. You guys can watch that.
Hey, Forsaken, your mic's on, but I can't hear you. And I still can't hear Jess either. Maybe I need to rotate down.
Can I just hop in real quick?
I was gonna say something.
I can hear you,
But yeah, real quick, everybody. You know, we've got like what 500-600 people, 585 people in here right now. If everybody could just take a minute, and we've only got like 40-50 replays. Everybody could just take a minute to like and share this space out. It's a really great conversation going on tonight. I'm sure a lot of your followers and friends would benefit from it. Like it. So everybody listening, just go ahead and go down to the video, share it out, like, share it.
How about now? Is this better? I had to go back to my phone. I don't know what's going on with my internet. I think the NSA is trying to prevent me from.
I think Q was right. If you look at the Q drops, it says they're gonna prevent Jess from.
Hey, you guys are missing the #1 benefit of Greenland. I'm sorry to disagree with everybody here, but y'all are all wrong.
There's gonna be a big, beautiful Trump Plaza. Greenland.
Interior
We're gonna have ice skating. I think that's what they like, right? Let's go. We're gonna have ice skating. We'll put a Gucci there. Everybody will love it. We'll put it on direct flights. Trump Air. Coming back. That's what I'm thinking.
I sent you an article from Harvey. Have you shared with Shane and the guys the Lee Smith article on
Which one? I read all of them.
what? No, what?
Which one? I obsessively talk about all of them. Which specifically?
Okay, the realists try and fail for now to steal MAGA stick suit.
No, that one I have not yet.
Okay.
Actually, I need to read that.
Okay, I'm gonna put it in the upper level.
It's like a really, really good outline. I love it. Ever since he was a bloody
I'll volunteer to read a bit of it sometime if you want. So, go ahead.
So, I mean, if it's worth reading, you wanted to read it, then we're going about, what, like another 20 minutes, Barbie, and then we're going to...
I like the way she said it, too. She said, Lee Smith. It's kind of like how Rush used to say Al Gore. Lee Smith.
I miss Rush Limbaugh. You know, his brother comes to my spaces. Hasn't been in a while. I gotta get him back on. I miss Rush Limbaugh so much.
We gotta have him at the new Trump Greenland. It'll be great.
I'd rather see the new Trump Gaza.
Let's go through these hands real quick, and then Stealth, if you want to read, go for it. Alex, you're up.
Yeah, just going back to the conversation about South America, I think that in terms of like ambassadors in those countries, the biggest ambassadors are the people that live here from that country, and I mean they know the United States, and it's not like nobody from South America is going to move to China. Nobody's living there or whatever. So that's kind of like just going back to that topic. Yeah, as far as
Listen, SEO.
The Europeans are putting all this pressure on them, and I think there's like propaganda and God knows what else is going on there. But yeah, it would be interesting to take it. And I didn't even think about the shipping lane issue, but I mean, Greenland and Iceland, that's another country, but their independence. So
A United Kingdom women's pool champion.
But we used to have an air base in Iceland.
Your family has been making Polish food in Chicago for almost 40 years.
Yes, that's how I remember my childhood. Tasting whatever my father made or my mom, and I miss that so much. This is Renata. I'm the second generation owner of Smakos Restaurants.
Thanks, Alex.
This is our pierogi. That's like our pride of the restaurant because they're handmade. Everything is made in the house. It is like it used to be, like our grandmother's cooked with real herbs.
So I did want to insert, because Barbie had asked me specifically earlier to mention a little bit about this, and we kind of went off the rails and went like on every topic but tariffs. But I just want to encourage folks to think about, and I mean, I'm happy to answer a couple of questions about it or describe it in specifics. But since everybody's already asleep anyway, I might as well put them to sleep even more by talking about tax incidents. So, tariffs are bad.
Spices,
I mean, that's the
nothing
main thing I want
artificial,
to
no
just drive
colors, no
across is
preservatives,
tariffs
no
are bad.
fillers.
Their taxes are bad.
Is your dad still around?
Government getting more money is
no.
bad.
Sorry to hear that.
Tariffs are bad.
What was it like taking over the restaurant?
Replacing bad taxes with less bad taxes is
my father
not
had a
necessarily
right here on the
bad,
job.
but it does need to
I
be
had
a replacement
to take
cycle,
care of him.
right? So I think one of the things I've seen that's
There
wrong,
was a point
like
that I thought
really
we were
wrong,
gonna
and
lose
makes me
everything.
angry.
Why did you
across a
fight
lot
so
of
hard
these
to get the
spaces,
restaurant?
which I'm certainly
Because it was my father's love.
But there's a lot of
He
folks
worked
who are
very
defending
hard
the idea of
when it came
tariffs
to
as
this
some
country
great,
to be
just
where
and
we are
righteous
right now.
cause. Like you,
So I felt like that I cannot disappoint him, and I had to keep his business running strong.
Hold on a second, brother.
I think
Because maybe that's the case.
he is proud
But
and
when we say
happy
fair
that I
trade
didn't let go and I didn't
You
lose
know how
this.
fair trade coffee
I
gets
don't know if
that
it's
way?
a good picture.
Is that
He was
some
always
idiot,
happy. He had
some
a lot of
liberal,
energy,
almost always
and
a
he
liberal,
loves to dance.
pays
He
extra
was
money
a wonderful
to some
dancer.
farmer someplace,
It was just
and
amazing.
only to that farmer, so that few select farmers who get a little extra money above the market rate, and the rest of the farmers in that market can have the privilege of saying, that's fair trade.
You got
Some
your
rich
shit?
person
Put it
in
this
San
way.
Francisco,
I sell him his
like
shit.
a Russian, they feel really good about
You
themselves
know?
that they
No
buy
sweat.
the fair trade coffee.
We good.
But the thing is,
I like it.
that when we
Get better
talk
price
about
when you come direct to the
tariffs,
distributor.
we're
Guess so.
only affecting us. On a fundamental level, cooperative advantage is good. Having countries produce what they're best at is good.
Can I get the shit?
And so if we don't see
You niggas ever seen this motherfucker
major
before?
reform in the U.S. that makes it cheaper to do business here,
Get the
these
fuck
tariffs
out
are going to have a negative effect. Now, with regards to tax incidents specifically, there's a lot of discussion. I mean, I've heard like so many bad economic statements like in the last few days. It's like my head's spinning. Being negative about Milton Friedman.
Where's everybody going?
You know, like somebody was like, "Oh, you're one of those Milton Friedman fans, aren't you, Jess?" I was like, "Yeah, like Ronald Reagan. You know, like is that bad? Like Nobel Prize winner? You know?" But the thing is that we have to think about the fact that both consumers and producers pay these tariffs in almost every
Lo que vemos en
scenario.
pantalla es un escarabajo bombardero defendiéndose de un escorpión con su asombroso mecanismo químico. Cuando se siente amenazado, mezcla hidroquinonas y peróxido de hidrógeno en su abdomen, desatando una reacción exotérmica que expulsa un chorro tóxico a casi 100 grados centígrados. Este ataque quema e irrita a los depredadores, obligándolos a soltarlo o huir.
Lo que vemos
Esta persona está con una cámara esperando a que pase el avión para lanzarla en el momento justo y conseguir una toma increíble con el efecto de minimundo. Me parece un vídeo espectacular, la verdad. Esta persona está con una cámara.
The secret to turning an underperforming
apple chips. They make chips all over the place, for everybody.
Yes,
so
I'm aware of South Korean skincare. I don't think that women in America should live without that either.
Well, some people believe you know what? My wife actually feels that way too, and about Japanese shampoo, and I still don't entirely understand why it's.
You don't need to know. We watch thousands of hours of YouTube videos about South Korean skincare and Japanese hair products.
I don't even think she did that. You know,
Trust me, bro.
Okay, bro. Well, what I'm saying, look, when I go to H-Point and I buy this expensive ass Japanese shampoo, I don't care if there's an import tariff. It's already 3 or 4 times more expensive. So I guess to her, that's an inelastic good. That is what you're saying. It's something that's so the bottom line is this: is the most important things that we get from overseas are going to be more expensive, 100%. The least important things are actually the least effective. So a lot of those stupid goods that you can buy on TV, like the couch that I tried to buy, that fell apart like a month later. What a story that was. Like almost killed my whole family. Not quite, but it was like we were like, the couch is collapsing. You know, those things are highly competitive markets, and the sellers are going to absorb a lot of the costs. But in a market that's less competitive, that certainly is inelastic, there's going to be more of that passed on to the consumer. Or, you know, like, if, like, I mean, I've also experienced the watch industry. Swiss watches are the best watches in the world, almost bar none. There's really not a lot of competition for them. Well, some of them, like, if they're only made in countries that are highly tariffed, right? Like, so, like, Rolex only comes from Switzerland. They're not going to freaking make Rolexes in the U.S. I mean, it's like literally their whole brand is Swedish. They're so Swedish. Oh my gosh, listen to me. Maybe not so you don't get late. Swiss, right? I mean, Swiss watches like all over the place. But like, you know, like Toyota though, like Toyota has, I mean, like they built a factory in the 80s here.
Wait, so now it's going to be more expensive to buy a Rolex? Nobody told me this. I'm surprised.
Even more, and not only that, if you could even buy one in the first place, Barbie, because apparently you have to wait in line for years just to get the privilege of not plugging down, you know, $10,000 for a Rolex. But anyway, you don't have to. But like, this is where I think, like, again, we just have to have the reality that tariffs are a negative. Going in, it's a tax, it's bad. Tariffs are not some special sauce. We should not worship tariffs. Tariffs have been used by
concrete
Democrats.
structure's been done, and that's 26 million pounds of concrete. This is the first natural layer. We're going to be putting the first layers of subsoil on. And for me, what I love about that is now I can envision like a pod print.
Freaking tell us that Mitch McConnell's. I'm not sure Mitch McConnell's making the decisions. Somebody on his staff who's you know, pushing around and making all the decisions. They really, like, these folks are the ones that are opposed to Susan Collins, the usual people. You know, Todd Young from Indiana, Mike Pence's buddy. You know, and they're the ones that want you to believe that Donald Trump hasn't factored in the negativity of tariffs. Well, it's possible that some people on his staff haven't. I'm not sure that Lutnick has, but I definitely think that they have a plan here. And I think
Bessent has 100%, and he is like the brilliant person when it comes to global markets. There's nobody more brilliant than him. Say what you want about Soros, but he
no, it doesn't matter. I mean, he worked for like Soros. Listen, Soros is a phenomenal trader. He's just an evil guy.
Well, actually, Soros is a very risky trader, and Bessent actually was able to curtail his riskiness and make sure. They did a whole bunch of research, like I was wondering, you know, why is Bessent so smart? So,
well, yeah, I mean, like, Soros has like legitimate business interests that I just want to and like, you know, and so Bessent, you know, is a very smart guy in the markets, very respected. And I think that he certainly understands the plan. The thing I wish that we would have done is I really wish we would have started out with a 10% tariff, and then when they got the pushback, then kind of cranked up the gas a little bit. I also wish we would, or maybe that, but also like if we would have started by saying, okay, we're going to abolish capital gains tax, but also, you know, China 34%. You know, I mean, because like, yeah, I think we can do without China, but like Switzerland and, you know, Singapore and some of these economies that are traditionally very free, high HDI economies, and Japan, we do need some of these guys. You know, we can't be totally isolated.
Bessent's negotiating with Japan.
That's right, and so that's very encouraging. And I posted, I think maybe you even reposted this, Mark. I didn't see, but I looked back and had a lot of.
I just want to make sure I understood you correctly. So you were hoping that.
You sound like Bassett, by the way, son. Like,
Yeah.
Are you Scott Bassett?
No, I could be undercover, but it is a disinfectant thing. So it's so what you're saying is that
you seriously sound like exactly like Scott Bassett. Like that's freaking nuts.
Yeah,
Am I wrong?
He just hopped in to make sure you're quoting him correctly.
It's an IQ thing. So what you're saying is that you wanted to see the rollout where they would have slapped a tariff, but also offset it with like a capital gains reduction or something, to help push the messaging. Is that what you're saying?
Well, it's not just messaging. I mean, that's what's necessary for this program to work. If you just raise tariffs, that's a disaster for us. We need the reform and the tax reform, especially. When is capital gains incorporated? I mean, like, I want to see personal income tax abolished, but if I'm honest, my economics knowledge, I have to just say, like, it's truly the case. You'd rather, if you wanted to really help the economy, abolish corporate income tax, abolish capital gains, and then the personal income tax. Because you'll have such a huge economy after you abolish those that the personal income tax will be a cinch.
100%. 100% concur.
And we have one of the highest corporate income tax rates in the world, too. We have a 26% top rate almost for corporate income tax, much higher than even like countries in Europe and so forth. So, but yeah, if we had announced that, Scott Bassett, Secretary Bassett undercover here, I think we probably would have avoided the market shock. And not that I think the market shock is
Trump
all
wanted
bad.
the market shock. I'm sorry. I'm not saying he wanted to tank it on purpose, but I'm saying that he wanted a little bit of it.
He did. The market shock. But yes, we have credit cards at 31%, and people that have a 700 credit score. People are gonna go bankrupt over these fucking interest rates for credit cards. It's one thing I understand. You don't want people to get charged with all the credit cards again, and the interest rates go crazy and all that. But these days, since COVID, these interest rates and these things have made it so it's not
Why is it
everything I've done
for the populace? Why isn't she protesting these extremely high fees, right? Isn't she like a populist? Where is she?
It is exactly. This is something that actually does need to be addressed. You can say, listen, we're gonna remove every single interest rate on everybody who makes, let's say, 300,000 and under, unless you have a business they use for the credit cards. Show us some documentation. But we're gonna remove all interest rates because the banks, what they've been doing is they've been playing with our cash. But they're going to make a fortune on this interest since COVID. That's really what they did. They put those interest rates higher to stop the spending. But you can say, you know what? We're gonna cut, the credit cards. If you have a full credit card, you have a high interest rate, you have a choice.
Yeah.
You wipe out the interest rate, and that's it, and you can't use the card.
But the Democrats tried to do that, and the CFPB attempted to, I think even without Congress, they attempted to regulate what fees credit card companies could count.
Look at the fees. I'm talking about 31%.
Well, but here's the thing about it.
These three women died and dashed on a $262 restaurant bill, but were caught by their own mistakes.
They actually ran out the door and ran and hid behind a service vehicle that was in traffic.
The women thought they could enjoy a fancy birthday meal at Chicago's Soul by this, leaving behind a $262.
Well, let's just assume, for example, that every credit card is an insane interest rate. So the thing about it is that even if that's the case, people are still making a choice to get a credit card and to use a credit card. Now, here's where I would totally agree with reform, though, and this is where I think
credit cards that people had
but so I think the thing is,
a lot of people who don't have good credit access credit. You're kind of shutting off access to people who actually need it.
We don't want to have a policy about attention. It's the same thing that people get really mad about, payday loans. There was this whole big thing in Texas that was banned payday loans, and in a lot of states, basically every state I've ever worked in, over 35, there's been some effort to ban payday
One
loans.
person who's ever gotten ahead or fixed their financial situation with payday loans hasn't gone through and been more into trouble, honestly.
I'm not saying payday loans are good, But what I'm saying is that in a truly free economy, you either allow the economy to connect voluntary buyers and sellers, or, and here's the thing, or someone has to decide where that arbitrary line is. And don't kid yourself, it's an arbitrary line. Someone decides what's appropriate. That same person that says, well, I don't think 31% interest is appropriate, I don't think payday loans, that person also can say, you know what, actually, I think that homosexual blacks should get more loans. And by the way, that's exactly what they did with the Community Investment Act. And so when you start doing that, and here's what I'm going to do with financial reform, 90%, stop allowing these banks complete and total access to the Fed lending window. Let's just get rid of the Federal Reserve altogether. But before then, let's stop printing money. Because if you see, that's the real driver of a lot of this. We have so much crazy financial BS products because, and the derivatives, because the system is not a real market-based system. But in a real market-based system, though, let's be fair. In a real market system, there are people who are not creditworthy and they do not have access, and they're going to have to put $500 on an escrow with one of these new lenders, like they're doing a Walmart credit card. Somebody's telling me about this right now. It's true. Walmart will do the credit card things like Medicare, but you have to put $500 on escrow with that little bank that they have, and then you get a $500 credit. What that does, it actually builds your credit over time. And that doesn't sound fair, and it's not. You can say it's 100% for sure, because you're having to put all the money down. But what I'm saying is, we don't want to regulate the market like that. That's the same mentality. It's the same process. Government only has force that allows them to say, like Gary Gensler, oh yeah, we're not going to allow crypto. That's not a safe product, et cetera, et cetera. So I think we need to allow financial freedom, and that includes some messy stuff. But freedom is messy. What we don't want to do is goose banks and allow them special access to the printing of money in the Federal Reserve System. Is exactly what happens now. And that's why we see, I mean, there's all kinds of rumors that, by the way, one thing
The problem is that we already have a strong capitalist system, and so I agree with you, but in practice, that is where the problems occur.
Well, but so you have to. So look, I understand what you're saying. Like incrementally, yes. I mean, like we don't have to do everything overnight. But what we don't want to do is like if you see weeds in the garden, you don't say, okay, let's go and get a flamethrower and burn the house down. Like let's stop. You know, we have a lot of bad programs that passed as a result of us trying to fix other bad programs, bad results. Right? Like that's a constant issue. So like politicians are like, oh, geez. Turns out the Middle East is unstable. Oh, golly, I wonder why that is. Well, we couldn't have done that.
Ask you real quick. So why are they driving cash out of the system?
Well, Secretary Bissett, what I would say to you is two things. One, I think that they don't like the fact that IMS. I know this.
It's to refinance.
So number one, Mr. Secretary, is that M0, which is the best measure of the money supply and really includes all actual printed money and cash reserves and so forth on direct available, deposits, the most liquid and the most available of cash measures. There's several different monetary supply measures that the Fed puts out, and then there's private ones. But I think that they would hate to see the public know how much actual inflation that there is. It's hard to cover it up when it's actual cash, when it's actual money in people's accounts. It's hard to cover that up. The second thing is I think that as we move towards a system where there's more swiping and there's more digital financial products, let's be frank, that allows government to have way more control over our lives. You remember that whole national ID push? I mean, these people would love nothing more than to encourage you to have a national ID, tie it to all of your financial products and all your fintech, and ensure that everything we have social credit score. Okay, I take payments through PayPal, not because I love PayPal, but because even though I think PayPal is one of the best things that does what it does, okay? And I've had numerous clients, when I've done political consulting especially, where PayPal has frozen my funds. You know, PayPal has debanked countless people. Is it just me or Trump and Donald Trump and other companies too? So that's a social credit score. The more we give financial products digital and online access, the more opportunity we have for government to regulate, which again goes back to the very principle. It's not that I'm against the idea of regulating interest rates. I think it's important for people to pay financial interest. At the same time, I would way rather have a free system where people make very stupid decisions and they're gullibly, they buy into dumb things with interest rates, they didn't read the thing, or the bank is being kind of rapacious or whatever, or they slid in the contract. I'd rather have that and freedom than have an SEC and a federal government that has the ability to tell us, oh, well, you can't buy this product from this seller, or hey, it looks like you gave money to that store over there. What are you really planning on? You know, by the way, there's also been people that are into survival that have been debanked too. I'm sure you guys are probably familiar.
How about Christian?
Account, and I didn't have an account to transfer from, within the same bank, although I'm on her account as a cosigner. I withdrew cash from my Schwab account, go into the Wells Fargo to add it to her account, and if I was not listed as a cosigner on her account, they would not have allowed me to put cash
Yeah, you sound really exactly like Stop Dissent. I mean, I'm not, you should not change your name to Stop Dissent, and everybody else basically thinking Stop Dissent. Stop Dissent 4D chess or something like that. These QAnon people
was a lane of proof.
I almost think
And the Chicago Pizzeria has been named among the best in the world.
Yeah, the list from Time Out puts Uptown Philly's Pizza in the Pan at number 11.
You sound so.
They singled out their.
Holy crap! DM me, and I'm going to do an interview with you and pretend that you're Scott Bissett or something. Like, this is fantastic. So, like, I mean, but like, we want to like, look, my whole deal with economics, like, I am pretty libertarian.
I
I'm not
don't give a
like,
that the stock market is crashing. I
don't want people going out and, smoking weed, sitting around
Así se ven los viejitos.
eating way too much chips or whatever, especially those really crappy, chips that are, below the Doritos, and they're like, I don't know, they're not even chips, like puffs. Weed people eat all this stuff. Yeah, people who smoke weed eat a lot of weird stuff. Is what I'm trying to do. But like, I don't want people being lazy losers.
Here's a massage therapist went from $8,000.
When you have people out there who are, starting a business, do we want the government swooping into the automakers? They sound really important. They seem really, really special. We should save the automakers because there's this big crash and they're special to America. Well, maybe they're special to America, but so would Joe Biden say, well, Amtrak is special to America. The USPS is special to America. What about all the small businesses? What about the small family factories that actually went closed during the 2008-2009 recession that didn't get money like the automakers who actually made horrible decisions and products, and we were propping up these union Democrats to prop up their dues. But the small town businesses never got anything from the government during that time frame. So when we get involved in the economy, we may be doing something that even I would agree with, at least on a personal level, but we have to remember that we are empowering the only legalized force in the world to make a decision that they think is right. And only government has the guns at the end of the day. I mean, we have the Second Amendment, but government has the legal right to use the guns however they want because they make the laws, right? I mean, I'm not saying that that's our Constitution, but that's just true. Governments have a monopoly on force. When we give government the right to decide what's right in our economy, I think that's a power I don't want to give to government. And a few radical people like Thomas Jefferson, Ben Franklin, even Hamilton, that big old statist, even agreed with that idea, and he argued for a central bank. But we just have to be mindful that these kinds of regulations, they
Well, in the United States, we sure have something pretty close.
And an activist SEC that hates crypto,
We have a survivor of the Battle of Iwo Jima.
and when Republicans are in power,
Party is 100 years old.
do we like?
He landed on the
Executive branch. As much as I love Donald Trump, I don't want Donald Trump to be a king. Okay? I was in one of Marana Falls spaces the other day, and there was a stupid question on the table where some people were like, well, do you think the government actually serious about this third term thing? And I'm like, guys, seriously. I had to be the person that was like, and I was the only person on the space. People that I had one of those. And I was like, God, nobody in MAGA wants Trump to be a third term president. If so, I'm not MAGA. I said, but I can guarantee I'll bring you to all of time one from you the Constitution, even though that amendment was adopted later, we're not from that. We support the Constitution. We don't want to allow Russia to do things just because we agree with them now, because that same power is going to be used by the people we dislike later. And that's that's how all the worst people in history have gotten into power. That's how the Hitlers get into power. That's how the Mussolinis is. They all grow government. And Germany in the 1920s
Yesterday,
and 30s,
President Trump declared, and it was in fact
before Hitler got into power. The left loves to say, well, Germany was libertarian utopia.
It was a miserable flight for some passengers headed from Chicago to.
It was totally insane. The government was so insane and trying to do everything and really lost and looking a lot like our government has in some ways for the last 20 years. That's dude, Secretary Bissett, I just want to thank you for that relation. Thank you for what you're doing. And if not, my God.
I don't think we're gonna ever get to the article, Shane, and I know you've got it with hands. But I'm gonna be a nice person.
Yeah. Sorry about that. I'm better at it than Cory Booker is, so you got to bet.
You don't have to not better.
I just came up to answer any banking questions any of y'all had. I've heard it for a long time. How much that money was things were, how everything.
We've been all over the place.
Any banking questions I can tell you about all that. Well, I'll throw one your way, then we'll go to the hands. We still want to try to get to Stealth, but maybe we'll have to do it in a separate space if she's busy. Anyways, the payday loan thing, can you speak to that, and then we'll move on to hands? Yes, payday loans are a disaster. So there's a lot of banks that are they're not available, right? So meaning banks wanted those people. They're a business. During Dodd-Frank, when that came out, a lot of that got cut out. And all it is it's simple, right? You come in with say you got a paycheck and it's $100. They're gonna give you $90 back. They take it and then they deposit it.
You can now carry
a bank has to bank that customer. That was causing so many money laundering issues. I reported a lot of them myself, AML, BSA. So that helped a little bit, but it's a disaster. When you talk about high credit scores, you're right about the credit score. It needs to be higher, but credit card interest rates are always going to be high. And I really don't understand why you can make a deposit. You really always make a deposit. As long as it's not in a denomination above $10,000, that requires that you can pay that to avoid. Some banks have a policy of
You're up there. We're going to be in Vegas and Sunlight, and we'll see if Stella still wants to read. Go ahead, Bree.
Yeah, just really quickly, I just wanted to chime in about the tariffs and then specifically about issues with ports and the canal, Panama Canal. I think it's interesting, right? Because if we were to continue down this current trajectory, am I wrong in thinking that we would require increased military intervention in order to stabilize our trade routes? Jess or maybe Rusty, Stealth, can anyone confirm, or Sunlight?
United Airlines is investigating a possible bird strike that forced one of its flights to return to O'Hare last night. Flight 20.
I'll jump in. Definitely down the Panama Canal. My brother served down there for a little while as a Marine. They're definitely present at all times down through there. With the port situation, trust me, it's being monitored. But it is a that's the only
All right, thanks. Yeah, that was just my question. I was just curious because it feels like
frick, dude? What is this?
It doesn't feel like it.
What is this thing going right here?
Every time
In September.
The way that things are going, right? That we would ultimately end up in some type of kinetic activity or have increased military activity in order to secure our trade routes if we were not to enact like tariffs, for example, and try or attempt to reindustrialize the United States to some degree. I mean, specifically around food, the fact that we are an import-dependent nation at this point. So, I don't know, that's just something I've been ruminating on.
Well, I know you're an ag, and that's the thing about China. About this tariff war, right? So China's one of the biggest imports from America. 25-35% of it is soybeans from America. Also, the import industry, they import quite a bit there too. So,
and Rusty, the reason why is because we are freaking subsidizing with way too many tax dollars unprofitable ag industries because these liberal Democrats wanted to make all kinds of, alternative fuels and stuff, and then when that crapped out, they had nowhere else to go but to sell these overly subsidized low-market ag products to other countries. So China's not even getting the best of the U.S., unfortunately. Like, it'd be great if they were importing stuff we actually,
But
be proud of.
Johnny Ernst is really happy with the internet production.
Oh my gosh, listen, every Iowa senator ever has been like the worst on ag subsidies.
Is there any way we can primary every single Chicago congressman and senator?
Please.
What can we do?
Please do.
Which ones do we even have?
Piece of shit place out.
Let's go beat your head
Every
against the
single
wall.
one of them I want out. There's this, let's be done with this jerk off. Let me tell you his name. Hold on. He's decided I broke up with him. Congressman Chewy Garcia, nice communist jihadist.
Chewy? He's from South Texas, I think, right?
He's Chicago.
Okay. I'm sorry. There was a Chewy from Texas. Oh, he's from Chicago. Well, yeah, can we just, let's
throw him in jail.
Deport.
He'll go to jail from this.
Deport.
I'm not his out.
did you know, there's like that one guy.
We'll give them the whole country.
The irony is that some people are like, well, look, Israel has all these dual citizens in the Congress, which they obviously don't. But there's actually, literally, there's a congressman in California who came here illegally as a child, who is now a U.S. congressman. I can't remember the exact number, or something like that. That's freaking nuts. Freaking nuts.
It's bad enough we have judges that are not U.S. citizens.
Not one
insanity.
judge. What is it? 25% of the 5 out of 15 judges, whatever that percentage is. My brain is shot. Now tell me you're not citizens.
शाम को 4,000 रुपए का बिजनेस 20 रुपए की 200 प्लेट बेचकर धर्मेश काका जी रोज कर लेते हैं और महीने में 2 दिन आते नहीं है। ये एक्चुअल में तवे के ऊपर बहुत सारा तेल डालने के बाद पूरी तेलिया तरीके से चाउमीन बनाते हैं। इनकी ऑयली चाउमीन बहुत ज्यादा नौजवान लड़कों को बहुत ही ज्यादा पसंद आती है। शाम को
नानी जी इन पैसों से क्या खिला दोगे मुझे कचौड़ी? कितने पैसे हैं सब गिनको लीजिए।
Progressive communist, self-described.
ये सब्जी आ गई है।
He's no relation to God whatsoever.
चम्मच आ गई भाई। ऊपर से एक पीस हमारी कचौड़ी आ गई।
I'm gonna blame Chewy on
This one was if you look back to the COVID era costs, it's not just the program, the CARES Act program, like the Paycheck Protection Program. It cost this country close to $1 trillion.
See tacos new caliente menu. That we have the grilled cheese burrito.
$800 billion or something like that. Anyways, I ran some numbers through Grok.
We got some
I was
Taco Bell cheese
curious,
sauce.
as far as a scenario to decouple from China, what it would take.
Why are they pouring powder into a mold? Because under extreme pressure, that powder transforms into solid metal in seconds.
See tacos.
Why are they?
I've been getting a lot of comments asking how I can
just, follow this tariff war out. And what's crazy to me is Grok estimates the impact for Americans, our pocketbooks, at roughly $300 to $400 billion. Well, if you take that and compare that to what we gave to businesses, that's half of it, right? So I've got a question for Jazz. For anybody up here.
Scenario.
Yeah, give me a second. So I got a question for Jazz. Anybody up here? Why couldn't the government put together a program, basically treat it the same way we did during 9/11? You couldn't do price gouging on gasoline, or you'd get in trouble, right? Why couldn't we do a government program where they can't tariff gouge the consumers? And then
So
the understanding, so the understanding would be on the back end that the money that they potentially lost in profit margins would have to go to, stateside manufacturing, developing their businesses here in the States to repair the damage that's been done over the last few decades, if not longer, as we exported all those jobs overseas. It seems there's a way forward.
You're not even a U.S. senator, and you're asking me this. God bless you, Shane. I wish the Senate asked questions like this, economic questions. Okay, so let me give you an analogy about what it's like. It's not exactly analogous to this specific situation, but it'll give you an idea of where this goes. Do you remember in the 1970s, there were lines at the pumps? And why was that? There were lines at the pumps because the government tried to get involved with the price of oil and forcibly lower the price of gasoline. I mean, that's really a short shrift on what happened, but that's one of the things that occurred. When government gets involved in trying to forcibly lower the price, what that does is it changes the supply curve and it reduces the supplier desire to actually provide products. And in tariffs, some of that is going to be borne by the producers anyway. But if we forcibly said, well, we're going to put a price limit on this, that's going to change the market in a way that ultimately will just result in there being a lot less of a market. I mean, basically, some people would participate and some wouldn't, but the consumer demand would far outstrip that market, I guarantee you, almost overnight. And then basically there would be a desire for alternative or substitute markets. And probably what we also see with that is a lot of black market trade. Another example of a situation like that is the minimum wage. When you put a minimum wage in place, even if it's a relatively low minimum wage, what you do is you make it difficult for employers to justify hiring low-skilled people. So you reduce the supply of labor by increasing, in that case, the price, except instead of it being a price cap, it's a price limit.
Or pizza
kind of
called
like in reverse. Anytime you do this sort of thing, you're distorting the supply curve in a way that's going to have negative impacts on the market. So if you did this, what you're just suggesting, then you would just simply have producers doing different things. And actually, I think the most common way to get around that, if you tried to do an anti-gouging law with something like that, they would probably just totally shift the kinds of goods that they are selling so that they could make the same amount of profit that they were making before. At least under a tariff regime, they're still in an internationally competitive market, so that the pressure is on them to at least accept some of the cost of the tariffs. But however much that is, as I said, depends upon the elasticity of demand. If it's something that there's high competition for abroad in other countries and here domestically, then there's going to be less of the consumer absorbing that cost and the tariff being passed on to them. But if it's something that we really can only get from China, or like, I was trying to think of examples the other day of like, what can we only get from one country? There's that weird coffee that's crapped out by the koalas, like in Malaysia or something, Heineken. Whatever it is. Heineken, yeah, but it's often not a specific good. I mean, if you really love Heineken, but like that Kope Luwak coffee, like I don't know who would drink coffee that's been shit out by a koala, but that's an actual thing. As far as I know, it only comes from Southeast Asia. So if you put a high tariff on that, and these people are loving this Kope Luwak shit coffee, you can, then that's probably going to be born for the consumer because
hold on. Do they have like little koala diapers?
It's a jaguar, Jess. It's a
jaguar. That's a jaguar? I thought it was like a koala.
Yeah, it's like a jaguar.
Hey, it's like a little monkey looking thing.
High on the eucalyptus, they just hang out.
So basically, Shane, whenever you put a price cap on something or try to make price gouging, you end up destroying demand and supply, and you really screw up supply in a way that producers are going to find a way around it, or consumers will. One way or the other, it's not going to result in the desired outcome.
So earlier on in this space, maybe it wasn't you, I thought it was you, somebody mentioned that the corporations don't have to pass this, you know, the loss of profits on to their customers. I mean, as long as it's still profitable. And as long
I
as
probably mentioned that.
Yeah, so as long as it's still profitable and as long as
it's still their choice.
Yeah,
right? But you have to have the margin. I mean, so there's a lot of factors here. Like let's just assume, let's say that the market is you and me, Shane, and let's say that that you and I are in a perfectly competitive market. We're both shipping stuff to Insurrection Barbie Island, okay, and we're both making the widget, okay, and I make the widget with a 10% profit margin, and I sell it for $10. So it costs me, $9, and you're making it for, $8, and you're selling it for $10. And then, Insurrection Barbie puts a 15% import tariff on our widgets. What's going to happen is I'm either going to have to raise my price, or I'm going to have to take a loss and figure out a way to stopgap the loss, or reduce the cost of what I'm producing. But it also depends on how you act. In a market with only two producers, I would suspect we would probably raise the price a little bit depending upon how much she has to buy the widget. Maybe she says, I'm not buying Jess and Shane's widgets anymore. But if there's now 1,000 other producers, and actually when you talk about places like China and Southeast Asia, there's not thousands, there could be millions of producers in some of these markets. Well, when you talk about that, or like ag or commodities, now you're talking about such a competitive liquid market, right, that the cost is going to be largely absorbed by the most competitive firms if they have the margin to do it. In commodities, true commodities, the cost of production is known and it's already been discovered by the market. So if you're mining gold, Barrick Gold, which is the biggest mining company in the world, and they're listed on all the exchanges in Canada actually, they can't, go and mark gold way up. They're a price taker from the market. They're going to have to sell gold at whatever it is. So, they are going to sell gold at that price. You put a tariff on it, it's like, well, it's gold, okay? So whatever. They're going to absorb it if they can. But if there was a situation where gold was so low and you were actually going to tariff gold from Canada, which I don't think we're doing, but if you were going to do that, then they would have to figure out a way to either cut costs or they'd have to mark it up, and they'd have to say it's market plus whatever. And this is how it's always been. So Democrats actually, and Republicans have done this, but it's almost always a feature of socialist countries and communist governments that there's a desire to stop price gouging and cap price hikes and these kinds of things, because the intent of the policy sounds great. Oh, we're going to just stop people from raising prices. But when you do that, producers take that price signal and they produce more. If the price of oil goes up, now suddenly we can go frack the shale down below San Antonio. It makes sense. It's cost effective, But if you say, well, you can't have oil above $70 a barrel, well, now it's not going to be cost effective to go produce oil down there. And you're just going to end up producing a whole lot less oil, right?
Central planning always fails, right, Jess?
Well, the more the plans fail, the more the planners plan. I mean, so like, we tend to see that the best laid plans are usually, as Hayek said, the road to serfdom. I think this is why, if there's anything I want people to understand about tariffs, is like, I don't care about tariffs as a bludgeoning tool, a geopolitical tool. That's great. I just think it's really, really important that we don't get diluted with some of the socialist terminology that actually is floating around out there, the Marxist terminology, that some MAGA people, certainly not you guys up here, this is a really smart panel, but some folks are falling for on our side. They're starting to get into this idea that, yeah, man, government should do this or this or this, and this intention is the result. Well, no, you can't judge a policy by its intentions. So I think that's really, really important. But I'm sure that answers your question, and then some, Shane. I am better than Cory Booker at filibustering.
Suggest. So yeah, I agree with the government getting involved with stopping price gouging and all that. But I'll just throw this out for food for thought too. I saw today a post, and I can't remember who posted it, but Fabletics, is now adding to their invoices a tariff surcharge amount. So anybody who buys from that company, has to confront the fact that they're raising their prices because of tariffs. So it got me to thinking, and this just popped into my mind when Shane asked the question that you were answering, and this is just food for thought, no idea if it worked. What if the government offered for businesses that are impacted by having to pay more for imported goods until we can get a handle on this thing. What if on the back end they offered some kind of tax incentive? You know, if you're impacted by tariffs, and somebody smarter than me could probably figure out a better way to word it, but you know, what if they said, okay, you know, John Smith's, you know, widget factory that has to right now buy stuff from China, you know, can write off a percentage of the increase of what they have to pay for importing products to make their widgets, can write it off on the back end on their taxes, and, you know, make a big announcement, do a big PR campaign about it. We're doing this to help the American businessmen.
Right.
Then, you know, people are going to ask, well, why'd you raise your prices 10%?
Hey,
The president
forsaken. I'd like to see if they have a line item to recognize the tariff. Why don't they have a line item to recognize the corporate tax? Why don't they have a line item to recognize
that's a good question, but let me answer that question though real quick, because that's actually a really good question. For a second, I saw a different version of that earlier on a different space that I wasn't participating. I was just listening. Okay, so if you did that, that's actually a reasonable thought, right? Like, let's give a tax incentive to businesses right now to give them relief from the tariffs. But here's what would happen. So the tariffs can only work to repatriate and reshore production if that price signal is there. In other words, you have to make foreign goods more expensive so that you incentivize producers to move to the United States. At least as I understand it, that's a huge portion of why President Trump's doing this. If you were to give an incentive to people who are using foreign sourced goods, frankly, even if you were to later phase that out, that would distort that market such that the incentive to reshore production wouldn't really be there. And by the way, we often see this where tax incentives are used by local governments to lure companies to move to town. And we're going to bring jobs to so-and-soville, and so we're going to, waive their taxes for years. I worked on that issue. That was one of the main issues I've worked on in my career, actually, is that kind of economic development, as they usually call it. The economic developers have never been in business. They've only been they're like brown grads who are real proud that they think they know how an economy works. But what happens is a lot of these tax incentives end up in this war to the bottom, where cities or counties or school districts are giving away as much as possible so that you're ultimately seeking incentives instead of actual profitability. And what we call that is rent-seeking corporations, right? So when you think about, for example, a company that's looking to shield itself from regulations or more
battery factory in Nevada.
Yeah, well, exactly. Well, listen, and every business owner with the opportunity will take these incentives, because why wouldn't you? There's no reason not to. And they act like it's this big competition. But what ends up happening is that these companies, rent-seeking means that they literally go around and they seek the best incentives that they can get, the best tax deal, the best everything. Now, while we don't want to add more regulations or taxes to anybody, why should one company get their taxes basically paid for by everybody else? And that's exactly what happens when you have these. So if we were to do this, it would also have that effect where taxpayers, for example, let's say the poor consumers who are slightly poorer because they maybe have a harder time affording the car made with those foreign sourcing, for example, those foreign sources. Well, that, ironically, that consumer, their taxes would now be paying for that tax incentive for the guy to write off all those foreign sourced inputs. So these are the kinds of reasons why I'm not saying there's no regulations or anything or it's all Wild West, but we have to remember that the reason why we're in the situation that we're in is government thought that it could do a better job directing the economy than people could. And I trust people more. I mean, I think that we've seen that relatively free, even unregulated markets do a much better job. I mean, crypto would not be anywhere where it is, nor would the internet. Imagine if the government had gotten involved in the internet, guys. I mean, I don't care what Al Gore said. Like, if the internet had been restricted by government and regulated so that it did not have the ability to be a Wild West, you would not have half of the economy that we have today online. It wouldn't even exist. AI would not exist. Basically, everything we take for granted, including X and X spaces, would not exist. If the internet had been regulated by government, we would still be in a much more immature era technologically. So it's only because the market was allowed to run wild that we have crypto, that we have the AI, that we have all this stuff. And now government's trying to get involved regulating AI. God bless them. I mean, I think that you should, if you get copyright claims and stuff, maybe you find a way to seek torts on that. But actually, that's kind of the point. That's the last thing I think is a big tie with a bow on this. If you have a free market, people say, well, what if somebody's hurt? Well, that's why we have courts. That is actually what courts are for. Courts are not there because some old woman spilled a hot coffee in her lap. Courts are there because you have people who are hurt when someone doesn't follow the rules of a contract between two willing parties. You have courts because someone should be able to make a claim against somebody else. But otherwise, you really shouldn't have all these laws and regulations. If somebody, where you can put some laws in place in the economy, is what are called neighborhood effects, or economists usually say externalities. But the way that works is if I'm puffing smoke out of my chimney and the soot lands on your roof repeatedly, well, you might get tired of that. You might say, Jess, the soot from your chimney is landing on my roof. That's an externality, right? Now, maybe you would allow me to pay you for the inconvenience of having my soot land on your roof. But when you have things like that that happen on an environmental or a macro scale, it becomes hard to judge who should be compensated for the inconvenience or the difficulty or the poisoning of the, or whatever, you know. So this is why government has certain laws on pollution that I think are fine. Don't pollute rivers, don't pollute large bodies of water, you know, don't pollute the environment. On a basic level, I think those are fine. You know, don't go and, you know, kill people. Obviously, there's moral reasons for that, but, you know, in a strictly economic sense, those are externalities too. Violent crimes, nobody agreed to the violent crime that you perpetrated on them. Nobody agreed for you to loot their store. These are all things that why we have laws, but we shouldn't have laws because somebody who graduated from Dartmouth decided that their 300-level economics professor, who's a socialist Marxist, said, you know, I think we should figure out how to lower the price of vacations to Ghana so that we can all be more like Karen Bass, who's a real worldly person, and we can all become the mayor of Los Angeles someday. You know, I think those are the kinds of things that you see too much of in government. And those people shouldn't be deciding. Nobody.
Karen Bass should be in jail, Jess. What are you talking about? She went for 15 years to Cuba. She was part of a terrorist organization that blew up the Capitol.
Isn't she nuts?
She said when Castro died, my F.A., she hired a guy who was a radical Islamist for the Nation of Islam as the head of emergency response, who then called in a bomb scare to the city hall and was arrested and by the FBI 2 months before the whole state fucking burned down. All 7 emergency response systems and not a single one worked on the fire.
She is horrible.
Okay? They should all be in jail. Terrorists and communists, every single one of them, terrorists and communists. And Gavin Newsom should have a cell right next door to them, and they can bring others there.
Absolutely.
I don't.
Absolutely. I love it.
I mean, the fact that he's doing podcasts and Charlie Kirk and everybody else is going to his podcast is crazy.
That is surprising to me.
The fact that he's still in office and nobody arrested him and nobody arrested Bass, and where the hell is that guy, Brian, whatever his name was? He worked for the Nation of Islam. Okay, for 11 years, Democratic Socialist, gets placed in a position he has no experience. Okay, by her. 13 months, and within 13 months, he calls in a bomb scare and his door gets kicked down, his like $5 million Pasadena home, and he's been missing for 2 months and nobody knows where his ass is? Yeah, no, I don't think so. All terrorists. Bye. Deport to Cuba.
Awesome. Stealth, you get to be the president of the new American territory of Cuba. Congratulations.
Yeah, great. Yeah, it's gonna be a huge prison. Just
keep the cigars. Keep the cigars, please.
Are you kidding me?
Said Siberia.
Are you kidding me?
We hit Greenland for that reason instead of deport to Cuba.
Don't destroy Greenland.
Oh, we'll make a Siberian gulag up there.
These people should be in jail. I don't even understand what's going on. We had all the president came, everybody came, and they're all walking around, and he's got his brand new $9 million house that he bought in a trust fund from Pritzker. Gavin Newsom, are you kidding me? I can't believe it. I am sorry, I just cannot believe it. It's ridiculous. Somebody handle California.
You know, actually, Pritzker, you know, you talk about government subsidy. If you wanted to give a subsidy to a Chinese buffet, send in Governor Pritzker. That's a subsidy.
Pritzker's a fat piece of shit.
Sounds more like a tax.
I don't care what he eats. I want him in jail too. I want all of them in jail. All of them should be in jail.
Put them in jail!
Find their guilt. It's going to be quite
Pritzker might
who sells, though.
He's gonna need a whole jail, that fat piece of shit.
By these lefties. She fully knew. Didn't what's his face do a whole undercover thing and record